The Survivor Specialist Film Will are back, and today our Survivor 50 coverage continues, and we are joined by Mike Bloom, and we're going to recast Survivor 50. Part 1, question mark, maybe. We don't know yet. It could be a full thing. This could be a two-parter. We're going to have to see where we leave off and really see how the audience reaction is, right, Mike? We got to wait for the box office numbers to hit before we decide.
Material that necessitates a two-part podcast. Don't tempt me with a good time, boys.
There you go.
Yeah, thrilled to be here to talk about Survivor 50. I think in a bit of a different light than a lot of the discussions that have happened up to this point. I mean, believe it or not, gentlemen, we are encroaching upon, the 1 month mark from this cast being revealed. And so there's been a lot of discussion out there. There will continue to be so as we round the corner into 2026. And almost like equally weight in the discussion as to who's on the cast is who's not on the cast. And, I came to you all with hat in hand with this wild idea as to how to look at the 50 cast in a very different way. And I'm excited to engage in this thought experiment today.
Yeah, because we're not just recasting it based on here's who the 24 best people would be. And that's why this could end up being a two-parter because, people were talking about yesterday. I think the winner is announced in 3 days or 4 days or something like that. Like, I think the winner might be announced July 1. Now, granted, if we have a live reunion, maybe that won't happen, but that's how long ago this took place. I mean, this is something that, like you said, Mike, we're at a month here of just discussing this, but rather than just saying, here's the 24 that we would have rather seen, Mike, you had this idea of a more unique way of putting together the replacements. So why don't you kind of explain that?
I would love to, because look, we can talk until the cows come home, and certainly everyone has had their takes on like why isn't so and so on the list, etc., etc. But listen, I'm going to drop a major bombshell here on you all today. I'm a massive nerd, and so the multiverse is my shit. And I love this idea of looking at things through an alternate lens to see, what could have been, what things might look like in a different way. If someone had done something, how does that affect the rest of Survivor history, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I thought is that specifically today, to start at least, we could come up with a new cast for Survivor 50 in its alternate form. Now, we are not straying, I would say, incredibly far away from the original formula. We're not just saying, oh yeah, here are the people that I want to see on, because again, we've been there before. Literally, I was on this podcast with the two of you as we drafted tribes for Survivor 50. I actually had a pretty good hit rate, I think, looking back upon that. But I decided, let's try to, operate under a set of rules here. They say that pressure turns coal into diamonds. That's what one of the Survivor 50 cast members said in his final tribal council. But we are going to today have a little bit of a thought experiment where we are going to essentially like replace each member of the Survivor 50 cast with sort of a facsimile of them. And specifically, we're looking at the lone piece of criteria being placement. So we are looking at somebody from that era, because it just so happens that the Survivor 50 cast is comprised of half people from seasons 1 through 40, half the cast is seasons 41 through 49. So it has to be within that specific era, old era or new era. And the contestant we pick will have had to place in, I would say, at least one of the same placements as the person that we are replacing. So it's not just anybody that we're throwing in there. We are looking specifically for, okay, if it's not this fourth place finisher, which fourth place finisher are we bringing in? And it's an interesting experiment as well, because if you look at this cast, again, we don't know about what happened on Survivor 49, but at least from 22 out of 24 people, the lowest anyone has placed their first time out is 8th. This is a very top-heavy cast in terms of initial performance. And I think that's going to bear a lot as we look to who is going to replace them in this new version of Survivor 50.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that could be very interesting. If you think about, a lot of people are rumoring, did Savannah or Riz win, right? Did one of them end up pulling out the win? Are they going to be top 5? We can almost guarantee, though, we're not going to get a Michaela placement from one of them, right? It feels like that would be so out of nowhere to compared to what the rest of this cast is. And for all the complaints about the cast, they are all top finishing people here. I mean, you're talking at least the top half of any season of Survivor. It's not just new era. any season of Survivor, these people would finish in the top half. So, Mike, I'm excited to get into this idea, and I'm excited to dive into this and see kind of where everybody landed on some of these numbers. Will, you haven't really gotten a chat here yet, 5 minutes in. So I'll ask you, when you were looking at some of these 3-4-time players from the old era, were you like taking into consideration their first game a little bit more, or were you saying, no, I want to fit somebody in, so I'll take whatever game I can?
Well, first I want to say, do we even need to recast 50? We're all so high on this cast. They really nailed it. So is this even a worthwhile exercise? We've been so happy with what we got. So, this is just a fun little extra thing we're doing.
It's the equivalent, Will, of like sometimes just need a little bit of a shakeup, right? It's like, oh, let's sleep on the other side of the bed tonight.
Yeah,
I just want to. The grass is always greener. You never know until you try.
Let's try. I don't think we're going to be successful in this. I doubt we can top the cast that we were given and what we ended up with, but we will do our damnedest. Phil, the question was what play? I don't know if I looked at. I kind of try to reverse engineer it. I would be like, I want this player on 50. Let me see who I can then cross off. And maybe that's against the spirit of the exercise, but I was more looking for, these are the people I want on. And then I would check that person off and then would say, okay, who do we have left? Let me look at the placements now of who's available. But you're right. I mean, there are some people who played 3 or 4 times and they have a bunch of placements, and that kind of opens up some more options for you. But I was more looking about like, how can I get my favorites on this cast?
I feel you on that, because I was looking at some of these, and out of the old school, we only have 1 6th place finish out of the entire bunch. So you're looking at, you have 1 6th place finisher you can use from the first 39 seasons or 40 seasons of the show. But then when you look at 5th place, you have
5th placers.
So many. Yeah, it's a lot of 5th placers. And so
5th place is usually a pretty good. I actually found like I had too many 5th placers that I wanted back.
Yeah.
Actually. I didn't have enough.
That's either the Fallen Angel spot right before the finale in some of those really old school seasons, or it's like first eliminated from the finale.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And do you guys realize this? Like, I didn't realize this until I wrote it down this time, and I'm sure it's clicked in my head, but never in this way. Colby and Coach have the exact same placements.
Yeah, what is it? It's like 2nd, 12th, and 5th?
5th. Yeah. So Coach did it the reverse of Colby.
Oh my God.
And neither have participated in a tribe swap.
That's also true. That's coming up on our Everything You Need to Know About series. Will's finally jumping in, and you'll never believe it. On the first episode he does, which is Genevieve, which is going to drop on Monday, he complains about the Survivor 50 cast. It's unbelievable.
What,
it's
me? No, I would never.
Somebody else. This is the alternate universe, Will.
That's right.
Yeah. This is the really positive, really, really positive Will. Now, so I am excited to dive into this. So, Mike, I wanted to ask you, because, I've listened to some of your stuff since the 50 cast has been announced, but obviously we're all putting out so much. And then I know you also, you got to be there and everything. But with the fact that there's winners from the new era, and then you look at the old school and the best placement is 2nd. How did you feel about the fact that they didn't choose to do any winners from the old school? And does that bum you out?
I mean, a little bit. Yeah, there are certainly a lot of people, especially, yes, of course, our Queen Vesepia, but even looking at, that middle stretch of teen seasons, which is when I really came into my own in the Survivor fandom. I've been watching since the beginning, but like, that's when I felt I was finally really understanding the show and following along on the message boards and everything. And so, to not see an Earl Cole, to not see a Todd, to not see even like Tina Wesson, who had talked on Brandon's podcast about the fact that she wasn't given a call. It stinks because, again, I think a lot of the tests of some of these big old school players, especially from an old school Legends perspective, is like, okay, how different is the new era game? And I feel like there is no better test of that than like, hey, you won your season. But that was back when it was 39 days and people were maybe operating under a different set of rules as to what constitutes winning gameplay. How would it be now? That's more appealing to me. And I say that with no offense to Kyle and D, than more so the conversation of like, okay, these two players really dominated their seasons. Can we do it again after just having watched one of them do it only a few weeks ago?
Yeah. And we do have so many one-time winners from that old school. And honestly, or like a Tom Westman, who the second time he came out didn't really have much of a chance and still did a lot with it, and so it's interesting how we have I think 6 people who finished second place from the old school, or 5 or 6. It's something like that, but nobody who won. And yet we have winners from the new era. And I'm somebody who I'd love to see Chris play again. I know that there's not a lot of people who talk about Chris, but I think Chris's game is one
Chris
of the
from
most
Edge of
underrated
Extinction,
of all
right?
time.
Yes, of course. Chris Underwood, noted stan.
Yeah, exactly. No, but like Chris's game, I think, is one of the most underrated ever. Vesepia, we talk about. Earl, people have clamored for a while. And then Todd, I know I've had on the podcast a couple times over the last couple seasons with Todd's Pop Shop and everything like that. He's really more involved in the community now. And he would play. He's ready to go. So it's, maybe we could finagle a way to get some of the winners in if they played a second time. But unfortunately, we can't get any of those one-time winners involved in this cast because they never played if they didn't play again. So here we are. Where should we start this?
Do we want to just go sort of chronologically the way that Jeff announced who they were, so that we're going to be doing a lot of time travel over the course of this podcast? So there really is like no good place to start. So maybe we go with Jenna Lewis and work our way until at least Rick Devens when it comes to the old school perspective.
Should we do it as
that makes the most sense? I think that's clear for everybody. Just work our way up chronologically amid all the time travel we'll be doing.
And we can do it as like a Survivor Borneo player has landed on the island.
Let's get the announcements going.
Okay, here's the one that I feel probably the strongest about with Jenna, because this woman fits both placements. Did it in the opposite order though, and is also a pre-All-Stars / All-Stars player. So I feel like this is a great fit. Would make her the oldest woman to ever play Survivor. So I don't know if that would hit. But I went right to Kathy Vavrick O'Brien with this because she finished 3rd on Marquesas. She finished 8th on All-Stars. So she hits both of Jenna Lewis's placements. And if you're going back to get Jenna was somebody where it was she really worthy of being an All-Star? Whereas Kathy was absolutely, she's an All-Star. Now, Kathy's 70 now, but we're talking alternate universe.
That's the thing is, listen, I did an entire ass series last summer about the realities of trying to bring these people back. I'm done with that. I'm going pure fantasy here. I'm totally fine with bringing, septuagenarian Kathy Vavrick O'Brien back onto the beach. I will throw somebody else out, though. Now, again, there has been a lot of people who have come out in the intervening days and weeks about the fact that they may have been contacted for 50, but ultimately did not make the cast. So we talk about Jenna Lewis, 8th place finisher on Survivor Borneo. Let's just go one season further and talk about the 8th place finisher on Survivor the Australian Outback. I will throw Jerry Manthey out there. If Colby is going to play by himself in the real version, let's have Jerry play by herself in the fantasy version.
I feel like Jerry is the one that more people are going to side with on this. And Will, I'm curious where you're going to come in on this, but this is also the only 8th place that we have that we can use from this era. Now, Jerry finished 11th, I think, on All-Stars.
And 4th.
So there's a couple 4th placers you could fit Jerry in here. But yeah, Jerry not being there. And then obviously she went on Reality After Show after she put up that Instagram post. That's the one that people are, why do we get Colby without Jerry? So I do feel that makes sense. Will, what do you think?
I have Jerry later on my list. So there's going to be a lot of overlap here, I imagine. I actually used the 3rd place from All-Stars for Jenna Lewis. And this was when we got together the first time and did our Survivor 50 like wish list cast. This was my first pick there, I'm pretty sure. And it's my pick again. It's going to be Rob Sesternino.
Yeah, that's a good one.
He needed to be on 50. I know he's heading on to the Traders, but we were, and this was part of my complaints of the cast, is kind of, we were told throughout the process it's going to be a celebration of 50 seasons of the franchise. And so I'm really looking to players who like encapsulate more than just like their 1 or 2 time appearances, but have done, more for the game either outside or like their 1 or 2 appearances were so impactful that they like transcend Survivor lore basically. And you can't have US Survivor without thinking about Rob C. So he's who I want for this spot.
No, that is an incredibly good call. Not to say I'm bound by any sort of employment to pick Rob, but I'd be remiss to not agree with that. I mean, we have a couple of other 3rd place slots, though, right?
We do. Yes. The 8th place spot's probably more coveted, but I don't know if honestly, there are a lot of 3rd placers that I would like to see play again. So I used Jenna for 3rd here.
I can throw out some other 8th placers as well if it was on anybody's other
Sure.
short list. We have Rupert, Candace is a 2-time 8th placer, Randy Bailey, Tyson, Cochran, Andrea Belke. If we want to go towards the latter 30s, we have Gabby on there as well. Technically, even though you say no, old school winners on the real 50 cast, Jeremy Collins technically placed 8th on Survivor 40. We could have him there too. Any names hit the spot for you on that list?
I kind of find it interesting that Candace did it twice. Not that I would put Candace in here, but I think that's what's so fascinating about the Candace lore in Survivor history is she has played 3 times and never placed better than 8th, but also feels very impactful in those 2 8th place finishes. So I do like that. Survivor Archivist says Will Wall, the GOAT 8th place finisher. Don't forget about Will Wall. I love Randy. I just feel like with Randy, it's a shame that we got the heroes versus villains. I make so much sense. Nobody listens to me. They're all going to let Parvati go to final 3 anyway version of Randy in there, because that 8th place version of Randy, if we had never seen him play again, would be an easy locked in one. It seems like, though, pretty much all of these 8th place finishers, Mike, if I'm not mistaken, based on who you just said, all of the really good 8th place finishers feel like they've got another chance to come back and play. It feels like Survivor's really taking advantage of that. Maybe that's because that's a number that it was kind of like that they had a lot of potential but weren't able to utilize it the first time they played.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of these things where we saw in the first All-Stars, right? Like, the people who typically do well in these seasons, and maybe this bucks the trend in heroes versus villains a bit, but like happen to be the ones that made their way decently into the game the first time out to like understand the relative way the individual game is supposed to be played, but their target isn't massively huge, where it's like, oh, okay, well, like we have to obviously get rid of them. So like, if you're returning for another season, maybe like 8th, 7th, 6th place, as we saw with Amber, is kind of like the sweet spot.
Yeah. And I feel like with Rupert, he was probably the biggest name that you sit on there that I'm kind of surprised isn't on this cast. I don't know if there was, health issues or anything, or if he just wasn't contacted, or maybe, I don't know, wasn't interested. I have no idea. But Rupert's probably the one that I would say there, but we're trying to keep the gender numbers even here, even if we're not necessarily replacing, like we're not replacing Jenna with a woman. It doesn't have to be. It just so happens that Mike said Jerry, I said Kathy, but Will said Rob, and that's fair. The 6 men that I have, I'm more interested in seeing than Rupert. And I feel like based on what I'm assuming the 2 of you are going to say, I feel like there's better options than Rupert at this point, even though I do think that, heroes versus villains, Rupert went down as Blake's most underrated castaway from that season. So, there's something there.
Yeah. And I did not have Rupert on my short list, but out of the names you just mentioned, Mike, Rupert stood out to me as like someone who really, if we're talking about celebrating the show and like being an icon, like Rupert, I would like to keep him on the short list because it feels like he's such a impactful player. And we've now gone through a lot of his seasons. He's not as bad of a Survivor player as people think. Like, I know people are like, well, he's just a fan favorite. He's known for stealing shoes. He's known for digging the hole in the water coming in. But like, in terms of actually outlasting and maybe having a chance to win the game, he's far better at that than I initially thought, at least when I've been going through the seasons lately. So we give some respect to Rupert.
So are we going to give him respect here, though? I think, and obviously this is all in pencil. I think we could obviously go back and, change things if we want to, but do we have a name we want to possibly throw in here as our first unofficial cast member?
I think so. I have Rob later because of how many 3rd place finishers there are here. So I think we should either go with, I mean, we're talking Jerry or Kathy. I feel like Rob's going to end up in this list, but maybe because we have the 8th place here. I mean, Will, where would you fall on the side of that with Kathy or Jerry?
Well, see, I have Jerry later, and I don't know if that means let's toss in Kathy, but I think I'd rather see Jerry on 50 than Kathy. So I would say I'd go with Jerry. Okay. I think it makes, especially if we're losing Colby here, and there was so much chatter about them both being on and then her not getting on, that like Jerry feels like a more important person throughout, for celebrating the franchise.
And look, we're writing it in pencil, but Lord help us if we take Jerry off another cast for
I'm
Survivor
telling
50.
Right.
She'll be the last cut, and then we're gonna get attacked by the fans. Also, I only have a pen, Mike, so this is
there we go.
it. We're set. Redmond is here, and Redmond did say Rupert said he wants to play again in a recent video. So
I would keep Rupert on whatever short list we have, and maybe if we're disagreeing at the end, and we can agree on Rupert. I get what you're saying, Phil. There's more interesting picks, but again, it's what you want out of the season. So if you want your dream wish list, sure, but if you want what's really going to encapsulate 50 seasons, Rupert is a pretty damn good name for that.
Yeah. So I think that's fair. If we all have like a
I didn't even have Rupert on my original list, so thank you, Mike, for tossing that out.
We all want to die on a certain hill, and then that just turns into all of our hills we die on, and here comes Rupert to sneak in. And
I think we're gonna have a lot of personal honorable mentions, and then we'll agree on a really
exactly.
So let's jump over to Colby then. And yeah, by the way, this is part one because we're 20 minutes in and we just hit the second person. So yeah, I can guarantee you that this is part one, and part two will be coming sometime in July. Colby, second place, 12th place, 5th place. Let's open this one to you first, Will, since you went last time. Who are you thinking here?
So this is a spot for one of my honorable mentions that I don't know if you both will like, but every time we do a returning player Dreamcast, I always say, do you know who it is, Phil? Already?
I do. I'm gonna literally get rid of my face here so that I don't have to.
Well, it's between two. It could be two.
Oh, okay.
People. I'm gonna go with Kenny from Gabon.
Oh, okay.
And maybe he doesn't encapsulate 50 seasons of the show, but talk about a one-time player who needs to come back. I mean, he could have been in the mix for Heroes vs. Villains. You could even toss him in for Second Chance or Game. I'm like, there were opportunities to get Kenny involved, and as far as one-time players go, one of my absolute favorites. So bring him back.
Before you say anything else, did the other person were they married to Cole Hamels at one point?
I will not say, potentially.
Yeah. Well, that's where I thought Will was going with this. The Kenny one I can get on board with. I mean, I almost ended up putting Kenny on my list. I didn't because, again, I feel like the men here, there were some really good choices for the positions that are here. But Kenny is somebody who, I mean, I made the argument when we did our draft here, Bloom, that I thought Sugar should be on. I remember you you were shocked for a second. But I feel like Sugar was so impactful. And I feel like with Gabon, you just talked about Randy. A lot of the people from that cast just get so misremembered or overlooked now because they didn't have the return of Sugar and Randy was so uneventful and nobody else, Corinne comes back, but goes out pre-merge. There's just not a lot to work with there. So Kenny gets forgotten.
All right. So for me, I also Will look to the 5th place finish, and I'm between two guys that have been talked about by many, many fans of who they want to see back, allegedly had been in consideration for multiple seasons, did not happen. Let's make some dreams come true. It's not dreams. Maybe dreams will pop up later. I'm between Shawn Recctor or Shane Powers.
Yeah.
To fill that 5th place slot. One of the many 5th place slots.
I have Shawn written in for this one because I feel like I put Shawn as my biggest snub of the Blake and I. Was it you and I? I can't remember who I did these podcasts with at this point. Did you and I do snubs? No, me and Blake did snubs. No. Me and Blake did snubs.
And there are no snubs for me. I agreed with every casting choice.
That's true. You didn't need to do that podcast.
Right.
Will did his own podcast that was why this is the most perfect thing that's ever happened in the history of reality TV. But I had Shawn as the number one snub of the old school because he came out, he did that questionnaire with Dalton during COVID. Yep. He was very big in the Survivor diversity campaign. And Shawn is just somebody who I want to see the new version of Shawn. I want to see what Shawn has done. He was so entertaining on Marquesas. So for me, this was an obvious one. This was a no-brainer. The first 5th place slot I could fill, I wanted it to be with Shawn Recctor. Now, Shane is also a very good choice, but I feel like Shawn probably gets the nod for me because I feel like Shawn would be a better person on the show guaranteed. Whereas Shane could be up or down depending on, where Shane's kind of at in his life. So I would go with Shawn.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'll agree with it. It's one of my short lists. So I'm happy to, and also it doesn't need to be, in proximity to their original season. But I think it is nice that you bring on Jerry, who comes on 1 season after Jenna. You bring on Shawn, who comes on 2 seasons after Colby. There is some proximity that's nice to this as well.
You ready for my next proximity when we get to Stephanie? I'm very excited. Speaking of proximity here, but I like that. I feel like Shawn fits here. Will, are you good with us using Shawn as this person?
Yeah, I didn't use proximity at all. I just went through kind of who I like for the placement. So I have Shawn later also. So it's not like I don't have Shawn's on my cast here. So I'm absolutely good with Shawn. But that just means when we get to a 5th placer in the future, I might have to,
Put Kenny
bring up
back.
Kenny's name back in the mix, or someone else who used to be married to Cole Hamels. Maybe.
Maybe. I would be okay with Kenny making this at the end of the day. But yeah, let's start with Shawn. I feel like it makes the most sense. Plus, we know we have another 2nd, 12th, 5th coming up with Coach later on. So we get to Stephanie next. 7th, 2nd, 19th. So I wanted to do this one just for kind of the shits and giggles here. Stephanie, I have replaced with James Clement from China.
Oh, man.
And I feel like if Stephanie could pick one person to replace her after the joyous time she had on Heroes versus Villains, it would be the man who made her life so happy and upbeat on Heroes versus Villains. And that would be James. But I don't know how anybody else is going to feel about that, but I just felt it would be fun to replace Stephanie with James.
Oh, that would be incredible. You talk about Jerry's crash out. Like, Stephanie would break the entire internet when she found out that her once tormentor from the last time she played would be replacing her. I mean, James is still such an enigma in the Survivor community today. I just talked about him getting voted out with 2 idols it was voted, I think, the number 8 greatest moment in Survivor history by the fans. Still fiercely remembered. Those idols have outlived even, I think, James's involvement in Survivor. So I think it'd be really interesting to see back. And if you talk about like impact on the community, right? Like, he won fan favorite back to back. He was one of the most popular players and also committed one of the biggest blunders in Survivor history. I went with more of the runner-up angle, and I went with Amanda Kimmel. I think that Amanda is somebody that was talked about for a little while when it came to 50. She, like James, who she has played alongside during her entire Survivor career, was someone who has kind of disappeared as of late, which I think has kind of had her pop up in the mind's eye of a lot of people being like, we haven't heard from Amanda in a while. What's going on with her? And so I do think that the idea of her coming back did bridge a lot of excitement for people, which is a little surprising given that I think the fact that by the time Heroes versus Villains aired, there was a bit of Amanda fatigue. She did play, especially 2 seasons back to back. But I keep saying this all the time. Like, for those who weren't around in the moment, there was a period of time where Amanda Kimmel was regarded as one of the best players in Survivor. And I think she would be an incredibly intriguing option to bring back.
I have her, but I used her for one of the 2nd place only spots later on because I feel like we can get wild with this.
5 more runner-ups to come just within the old school. So I do have Amanda later also. But I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I think we probably all agree and have Amanda on our list at some point. James did not cross my mind, but I kind of like that pick, Phil. I actually had Andrea in this spot because I was trying to even out my cast, and Stephanie had just a wide spread of placements. And so I kind of saved her for the end, but I kind of like the James pick.
What about like a Jonathan Penner as well? Because he finished 7th.
I love Jonathan.
That's another really good one.
Logmeister here said also Phil referring to a certain landscaper, perhaps, when I said proximity. No, it's not who I meant, but Gary Hogaboom, if he ever showed back up on my screen, I would not be angry in the slightest. I do like Penner, and Penner was supposedly in the mix very late. I mean, he made that big announcement on X, and Penner's not really somebody who just looks for attention. Penner's only going to speak when he feels it's necessary. So when he jumps in there and says, hey, I got cut, but hey, we got Mike White and Azie, I can't complain about that. I believe that he was in it that late. So yeah, I like Penner. We have one other 7th place finish here that we can use. And we also have a 16th that we might be able to put Penner in if we wanted to, right? Penner finished 16th on Fans vs. Favorites? I
believe he finished further up. He finished in 15th on Fans vs. Favorites.
Okay. 17th. Yeah, it was Joel who was 16th. Dang, we don't have a 15th. Okay.
Well, we can bring Joel back if we want.
Exactly.
Joel is great. This happened to me with Rob C too. I was trying to figure out how I could put Rob C with the Aubrey 16th place finish. I was like, who could I get in here? Rob.
I could also throw out another second place and seventh place finisher, and recently brought to the forefront, Geneva herself in the form of Danielle DiLorenzo could be interesting too if you want to put her on.
I like the idea of Danielle. I don't know if I need to see Danielle a third time though. Like I wouldn't be mad about seeing Danielle a third time. I listened to her podcast with Brandon from a couple days ago where she was talking about Serene and everything, but I'm not dying to see Danielle play again in the way, like if you were going to go with both placements work, I feel like Kathy would be somebody where I'd be like, wow, how did they pull that off? Danielle,
Yeah.
I would say that's cool, but I don't love her.
What about, again, it's always screwy with Redemption Island seasons because like of when they're voted out versus when they get eliminated from the challenge. Technically, Hayden Moss is billed as a seventh place finisher. And I feel like there's been a lot of talk about, how he would do on a second time, considering that, like, especially during that final stretch where it seemed like the newbies were getting picked off one by one, he had the most fight. We had Sierra return a couple of times. We want to pay some lip service to the guy that helped convince her to force that rock draw in the first place.
I love Hayden.
Yeah, I've always wanted to see Hayden play again. I know he's like sworn off Survivor though, or sworn off all reality TV shows or something like that. Not that that matters to us, but
yeah, Mike said we're not in reality right now. But that's, I mean, I love Hayden. I think Hayden's great. It also just, he's at the rock draw at final 6. How does he finish 7th? What is happening? Why do we do this stuff?
Yeah, blame that final challenge where they had to balance the piece of pottery on the board.
God, and they did that for the second time. And wouldn't you know it, that the first time it worked out that the smallest person left won it. Who won it the second time? It's crazy.
Who would have thought? So yeah, someone else that we could, throw out there if we wanted to look specifically to seventh placers, because we don't have a lot of them to really offer up.
I have another 7th placer. I don't know if you all want me to bring them up now, that I was going to save till Christian, but I would be happy to bring them up now if we want to discuss it.
Sure, yeah.
I have Lauren Rimmer as my Christian replacement.
I was thinking about Lauren Rimmer too. I mean, I think maybe, again, if we're looking for more so, like, again, these are not going to be direct replacements, but like if you look at an Andrea or a Penner or a James, someone who has come back time and time again, for Stephanie, who has also come back time and time again, and you're looking for more of like hey, we're looking for a one-time player to fill this slot. Maybe it feels more appropriate to like talk about your Laurens around then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have someone in that spot very close in proximity to Christian that I can bring up later. So
okay. So this is what's funny though, Mike. You were saying, they don't have to be close in proximity, and yet
I like it though. I like it.
I
think I know more because I only got the premise of this kind of telephone through Phil, and Phil did not explain that like we're like really more so time traveling and picking. It's not just placement, but really finding that person who kind of fits that role more. And now I'm like clicking in as we go through this, Mike, that like the proximity thing fits with the alternate reality, alternate universe way more. So I hear you on that, and I will do my best to adjust my picks so that if everything fits like that.
So who's penciled in for Stephanie here?
Yeah, so it's a good question because obviously we're already going to throw off the gender dynamic. If it sounds like we're sort of between Andrea, Penner, and James. And with no offense to Andrea, I always love when she plays. I don't know if we need to see her for a 4th time. I mean, I think her life has demonstrably changed since she last played in Game Changers. There's also the curse that surrounds her of like every season she plays on is less regarded. So like, I don't want to curse this season as well by putting her on.
Oh, true. Yeah,
so like, it's crazy because she's on 3. Like her first season's so bad, it's crazy. You could consider that her 2nd and 3rd seasons are worse. Like that's how bad it is. So
yeah, so like not to like write off your pick at all, Will, but like I'm mentally probably between Penner and James.
Yeah, no, Penner and James are way better picks. Again, my Andrea, I was like filling out my last kind of piecing it all together, but wasn't one of my first people I put in. I will say though, I think Caramoan like isn't as bad as people think. Like I know it gets ripped apart by the internet, but I think it's a pretty entertaining season.
The problem is they call it fans versus favorites too, but it's really random people off the street versus favorites.
Sure, but it's still Survivor.
Random people that played Survivor.
It's still like a lot happens that season that I don't know. Whenever I watch, I'm like, this isn't that bad. People need to chill out.
I mean, I think once you push through the pre-merge, like I still would, for my money, I still think that Caramoan might have the worst pre-merge of all time, but like the post-merge has some good stuff to it. It's got a lot of intrigue to it.
Yeah, I could get behind that. It's also helps that if you come off of 21 to 24, Caramoan looks like China. So it's like, it's not that bad. Anyway, so can I make my argument for James?
Please, go ahead.
Since Mike, you're more on Penner, it seems. I felt with Penner after he got medevac from fans versus favorites, he was one of the biggest. I need to see him play again. I always say that he could have won fans versus favorites. I make the comment all the time that Parvati's legacy is greatly influenced by Penner being medevaced. I got a crazy, really, really long paragraphs answer to that in a video we just posted, which Michael Goriev, I'm going to answer you. Don't worry, it'll happen. I do read most of the comments, everybody. But with James now, Penner, we got the answer in Philippines, right? It might not be the most satisfying conclusion, but we got the answer. James has been essentially pulled from the game twice. He wasn't pulled in Heroes Villains, but he tore his ACL. He couldn't do anything. The first time we see him play, he gets voted out with 2 idols. The second time we see him play, he gets medevaced at Final 7. The third time we see him play, he tears his ACL. Would have been somebody who could have been the last remaining hero. We don't know, but based on how the heroes started performing, if James is still there at Final 5 and not injured, he could be the Colby of that season sitting there at Final 5. We don't have a solution to James, so I'd rather see James play again, and I actually feel like he's one of the biggest misses Survivor has, despite the fact that it would be his 4th time, because I just feel like he was fan favorite twice and we don't have a conclusion to his story. It reminds me of Terry. Terry has no conclusion to his story. Yeah. And those were 2 incredibly popular players when they first played. I feel like we need those answers to those 2. Get them in before they're too old.
Now, ordinarily, I would agree with you, and not to make this too much about life outside of a Survivor, but if you talk about someone whose life has changed incredibly since, went down the path whistling Dixie, it would be Jonathan Penner. And so I do think, one of the reasons why I got excited about the possibility of seeing him when his name was in the mix was because he has gone through so much. And I cannot imagine how his loss affects him as a person and the way that he approaches things. It's also tough because both of them are incredibly entertaining. They're on the favorites tribe for a reason. James is one, I think, the more underratedly funny characters, especially in that era. What the Nickelodeon is going on here runs through my head rent-free. Jonathan Penner, of course, an incredible narrator. I don't think we could go wrong either way, personally.
Now, here's my question as we discuss this. Are we going to end up with both of them anyway? And during the Christian spot, just put one of them in? Or do you feel, because I have Rimmer written down for Christian.
Yeah, I mean, we could easily.
It's possible that we have this debate and then we just get them both on. But if you do need a tiebreaker here, I would have to go James because he is maybe top 3 Survivor players for me all time. He is very high on my list of he could play 10 times. I would not get sick of James. And I'm honestly kind of mad I didn't think about getting him in here. So
yeah. Now listen, Phil, your ironic pick ends up working out beautifully with James now making the pass over Stephanie.
I like that. So you got Jerry. You ruined my Kathy Vavrick O'Brien pick, but I get
as of yet, who knows? We have more third place opportunities.
So we get to Serene now. We have 4 placements here: 4th, 3rd, 17th, and 6th. This is our only 6th place. So that's where my head immediately went, was to 6th, because 4th and 3rd, we have plenty of other opportunities, but I wanted to be able to get a 6th place person in here. I don't know if either of you went in the same direction, but that's where I went.
No, I think that makes sense. It's really, I think to Will's point, it's kind of looking for the places that are the most scarce. It's like drafting a fantasy team, right? You're okay, there's only a few good tight ends. And so you want to make sure you snatch one up at the proper time, or else you're kind of left with the dregs, we want to make sure we get a good 6th placer right now. And so there are a few very good options up for grabs, I think.
Yeah. So who are some of these 6 placers? Did you type out more? Because I came up with one pretty immediately of who I wanted, but I don't know if you have a list.
Yeah, so we have a few highlights like your Crystal Coxes. You have if you want to put Shambo in there in terms of kooky character that we've never seen come back. We have, let's see, I'm trying to think about who else? I mean, you could say if you want to include Parvati, if you want to bring her back for time number 5, she was 6th place on her first time out. I'm trying to think about who else. Judd. So it's like all these like random, fun, one-off characters. But the person I would put up is someone that, as you were talking about, someone who got kind of an unceremonious exit in their sequel season that I would love to see play again, considering how she cut a path through her original season, like the machete she was menacingly holding when she taunted Eric Reichenbach. I'm going to nominate Amy Cusack.
Okay.
Interesting.
I like Amy a lot. I mean, Vanuatu is one of my all-time favorite seasons. Where for Every Season Matters, we're through the first 20 seasons, and I think I have it ranked 4. Like, that's how much I love Vanuatu, right? Like, I just love it. The person I went with was Davey.
Oh, interesting.
So I saw Davey. So this was one where I didn't go based on proximity at all. This is really my only one where they're not close in season at all until I have Rob Seaver Angelina, which is like, just because it was 3rd place, easy. But I went with Davey here because it's the only way to get him in. And I feel like, especially since we're cutting 3 David versus Goliath players, now I can get one back in. I would take Davey here, but I do love Amy, so it's hard for me to argue with Amy.
The other one that I would throw out here, and again, because we are completely in fantasy land, we can create the universe where Colleen Haskell actually wants to play.
That's what I was going to say for 6th place. Yeah.
Because I do think, because I think we want a Borneo representative, right? Much like 50 proper. Like, it feels odd to not have someone from that mega hit of a first season on the cast.
It feels right. And obviously you can't just take Jenna out, and then I guess you could have gone with whoever 4th or whoever 3rd place.
Suhawk.
Yeah, like we kind of,
Rudy, may you rest in peace.
Yeah, we've kind of done that. So Colleen as the 6th place spot to get her back feels absolutely right.
Yeah, I feel like that would make a lot of sense. I mean, I won't lie, for the next person we do, there's a 9th place there where I might have been considering Borneo. So maybe that's where my head went, kind of with Borneo. But I mean, I feel like Colleen, if you're talking about this is just pure fan fiction, who does everybody want to see the most? Like, I'm sorry, Davey, and I'm sorry, Amy Cusack. I do feel like Colleen hits that, oh my God, we've been wanting to see her play again. And unfortunately, the most recent thing we have of Colleen is her performance in The Animal, which is kind of a shame. So, yeah.
That's on a high note, Phil.
I know. How do you own that one too, Mike? Do we own that because we're Survivor fans?
No, I mean, I didn't. I definitely rented the heck out of it from Blockbuster, but I don't think I ever made the official jump to owning it. Is it even on streaming anymore? Have they burned all the copies?
I think they've tried their best to get rid of that movie from history. I think Will is Googling this movie right now to see if it's real. I think that's what we're witnessing in real time here. Unbelievable. 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean,
critics had more of an appetite for the wildest stuff back in the day, back in 2001. There was only so much. They're like, yeah, you know what? It's better than staring at a wall. Now we are a glut of so much great content out there.
This Amazon Prime $3.59, Mike. Should we do a we sit down and watch The Animal and that's a podcast over the summer? Is that
a long off season?
Yeah. My God. I'm just reading the tagline. Redmond again says maybe that's why Colleen works for Netflix now. She joined to make sure it would never be streamed there.
Should we spread the false rumor that she's the reason why Survivor ended up on Netflix during the pandemic, which was the reason why like so many people fell in love with the show and even applied to be on the show?
Yeah, it's Colleen. I love this.
Yeah, and if that's true, then she needs to be on 50.
I think putting her on. I mean, we can get into it again. This is in pencil. If we feel like certainly that 9th place finisher Phil might be a better representative, I think we could certainly take her off because I know he at least has expressed more of a desire to play than her. But if we get, I'm waiting to get him on, and so right now I think she makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's put Colleen here for now and we can go from there. And I just want to say, after he's involved in a horrible car accident and saved by organ transplants from assorted animals, Marvin Mange acquires amazing new powers. And Colleen said, yeah, sure. I'll play the lead female in that movie. That sounds great. The Animal. Anyway, I like it. So Azie is next. So we have second, ninth, fourth, and 12th. And because we have a lot of seconds and fourths, I went to the ninth here. I did. I went to the ninth, and I already hinted there were two that I was looking at. One was Greg from Borneo, but the other, just because she deserves more credit than she gets, and people have kind of forgotten about her altogether, is Kelly Goldsmith. I think Kelly Goldsmith would be phenomenal on another season of Survivor. I think that she was so ahead of her time. And it kind of bothers me that Kimmy Kappenberg, who I did like her second time, got to come back, and Kelly Goldsmith wasn't a consideration for that, because I feel like Kelly would have brought so much game as an old school female representative. So Kelly Goldsmith or Greg are the two people whose names I came up with for this spot.
Let me throw out somebody who I personally believe is mistakenly affiliated with Azie, only because he played as a young, long-haired, attractive man from California who made a deep cut into the game and finished in 9th place, much like Azie, on his second season. Give me the milk. Give me Malcolm.
I had Malcolm as a 4th because I forgot about 9th, but 9th.
I had Malcolm as 4th, but Azie also got 4th, so it works. It works out perfectly. Wow. That's why this is like the perfect pick, because they placed together twice, and just their vibe. Like, if we are going into alternate universe here, I think Malcolm is like absolutely Azie's like kind of doppelganger.
And he's yet another person that, like, it's not like he completely divorced himself from Survivor. I think Malcolm's just a guy who, like, leads a fairly private life. And so, like, has kind of just gone off and done his own things. But I think he said in a quarantine questionnaire that, he was looking to come back. He's gone through, a lot. He feels like he's grown up significantly since playing, especially when 25 and 26 back to back. But, like, again, much like we were talking about with James, you're talking about a guy who was incredibly hot at the time that he was hitting his zenith. He was, runner-up for fan favorite in 25 and then won in 26.
Who did he lose to in 25?
Lisa Whelchel.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's crazy to think about. Her friends must have just been voting. That's crazy. But I mean, I like Lisa. I just don't. I don't see that.
Malcolm is just like the better and more interesting version of Azie too. Like, especially with Malcolm, the way he goes home in Game Changers. That's where they do the join tribal council and like just a random twist. And it was actually playing a pretty damn good game for it. And he goes out so early. It's like, it doesn't feel like we haven't been oversaturated with Malcolm, whereas you can't really say that about Azie.
That's the thing, is that, as you mentioned with James, Phil, it's kind of like, that's how Malcolm's legacy ends on Survivor, with this random ass vote where it's basically just due to JT opening his mouth and kickstarting what was argued as like the first live tribal council ever. That's how Malcolm goes home. I also feel like if you look at legacy, I mean, how many times have we heard Malcolm and Denise mentioned, both on the show and in obviously a lot of discourse as well? Like, his partnership is kind of game changing in its own way. Perhaps one of the reasons why he was on that season.
And I mean, when he says, I'm going to throw up, that lives rent free in my head, when he's just like realizes it's going to be him. I always say with that episode, and you go back and listen to our 34 coverage at the time, I say that was for instant gratification, but that twist was not looking towards the future of what that could do to a season. The instant gratification of that one episode was solid. It was an exciting episode, but it really started the spiral of what was Game Changers, because you lose such a good, fun player early on. I mean, I had Malcolm here for Devins in 4th. Because I just used him as the 4th place, but I'm more than happy to use him as a 9th and potentially get a different 4th place. And Malcolm's got to be on this, in my opinion, though. No matter
are there any other 9th placers that we feel
it just means we would lose Greg in that situation if we use Malcolm for this spot. But I will say, like, as much as we want to see Greg, feels like Malcolm is a better fit for Azie's replacement.
And especially, again, with the...
Unless, Phil, you want to die on the Greg, though.
No,
yeah,
I'm
but
good.
with the loose Colleen in place as well, like as our Borneo representative. I think, like you talked about with Rupert, Will, I think we could put like Greg as sort of like a hanger on right now on this big bulletin board of like, okay, if we're able to shift things around, or like Colleen gets bumped up, I would want to put Greg on. I think those are probably the two biggest Borneo reps we would want to have on, with maybe one exception. So it feels like I'm a huge Greg Buis stan. I think I'm okay leaving him off for right now in lieu of things being shifted.
Yeah, and I think Colleen fits here really well, and I think Malcolm here for Azie makes sense. And Will, I just shot you a text. I don't know what happened there. All of a sudden, it just like went to delay. So I don't know if you want to check that. It was weird, but yeah, I feel like Malcolm makes more sense. Here's a random question though, since we have a 12th placer and we're gonna have one more 12th coming up here with Coach. Are there any 12th place finishers that were worth considering for this? Because I know that the lowest placement here was 8th, but is there anybody in that 12th place spot? Because this leads into Coach, if we're willing to pencil in Malcolm, that would make sense.
I mean, there certainly is some like highlighted players, like Brian Corridan is a good example. Tracy Hughes Wolf, these like oftentimes in consideration of like some of the biggest pre-merge characters of their era, and then we start getting into the 20s and 30s when those people are actually on the jury, and you get like your Jim Rices, you get into you get into a little bit of like trying to remember, because then you get into like George, who's like Savage is another 12th place finisher.
Redmond here with Ace from Gabon, another Gabon representative. Ace is great.
Yeah, I just don't know if any of them makes sense as like a representative on 50. And that's the problem with 50 is that like again, the casting process kind of cast this down wide of like, okay, is it Legends? Is it Second Chance? Is it New Era All-Stars? And the answer is yes to basically all of it. And so if this cast had a more concrete theme, then I think it does make sense to bring back like a Tracy or a Brian or an Ace. But otherwise, I'm not really seeing any 12th place finishers that would necessarily, like Adam Klein, I guess technically placed 12th in Winners at War.
I would do anything to get Adam back on. We love Adam. Adam's our guy, so we would do anything for him. But
seems like 50 went out of their way to say like nobody from 40 is coming back. Yeah. Especially when we did get D and Jam Jam. It's just like it seemed purposeful.
And especially because again, I think that 40, I don't know, personally, I'm sure I have, pushing against the grain here, but like when I was thinking about who to bring back for 50, like I didn't necessarily want to see Rob or Parvati or Tyson come back. Not just because I want to see these people booked and blessed on other shows, but because like it felt like such a natural sunsetting for all the times that those people had played. I think they definitely had a sense of that from production's perspective as well. And so as we talked about before, I think a lot of the reasons why we're doing some of this casting is like, we have an appetite for having a lot of these people come back and play again. I'm not sure a lot of the people from 40, I would like, even Adam, who ends up, going out in 12th place, has obviously a much worse run than the first time out. Like some would argue is one of the highlights of the season because he kind of is part of, some of the biggest drama and some of the biggest comedy to come from Winners at War.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember a long time ago, Alexa, me, and Peridium did a podcast about the best forgotten Survivor players. And when you just look back at that, like you see how many players there are that really could have gotten a second chance if there was an opportunity close after that, then just totally get forgotten. And I feel like, the names that we're bringing up and the names that people are bringing up around 50, I hope that casting or somebody is listening in some way, because we did see shortly after, some of these returning player seasons, we get second chance. The people who are left off, we get game changers.
Yeah.
So I do hope that coming off of 50, there is some of this, wow, people are really disappointed we didn't put Jerry on, or really disappointed we didn't put Penner on, or really disappointed that Davey didn't make the cut. And you start going down this line, and maybe that does lead to another second chance type thing where somebody like Brian Corridan does end up as a name. Because look, those are the types of people that I would always argue were like so much fun and so worth watching play again. And unfortunately, there's just never been a spot for them.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I've got some sad news, Phil. I feel like if those names didn't get cast on 50, like almost like last chance for a lot of those names.
I'm just saying, man, we had Kelly Wigglesworth, Kimmy Kappenberger, both.
I know maybe there's some outliers here or there, but especially with, there haven't been any like new era returning seasons. And it seems like they want to make a push to bring more of those players in with doing half the 50 cast, like 12 of the 50 cast was new era. I imagine they're trying to kind of build up new era stars, and returning spots are going to be more filled with those players than like one-time players from season 11.
I mean, you're right, but it's just fun to dream.
I know. Sorry.
All right. So we put Malcolm into Azie, so we're at the halfway point here. So I know we got like 40 minutes here, so we can't go
do this.
so crazy.
Yeah, we had an intro too.
And to be fair, we mentioned a bunch of names that will probably get brought up again later in the podcast.
Yeah, like Rob and Amanda are probably going to end up fitting in here. So let's go to this one though. So we have Coach, our 2nd, 5th, 12th, 2nd. Where does everybody feel on this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is a case of like, how many more? I'm trying to remember, how many more 5th placers do we have after this?
Just one. Aubrey also finished 5th. After that, though, nobody else.
See, this is where I would toss Kenny back in the mix, especially if you're going to talk proximity to the 5th place of it all. Oh, wait, was Coach? No, Coach wasn't 5th in token cheese, was he?
He was. Yeah, he was 5th in token cheese.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, just take the 5th placer in the season before.
That's a good point. I'll could throw Shane back out here as well. Yeah. You know, maybe someone that in another alternate universe would have joined Coach on the villains tribe. I mean, speaking of villains as well, I think we are in a bit of a surplus right now in terms of we have more men than women, so we can gender swap again. And I would maybe Abby Maria I could put up there as well, 5th placer in Philippines.
Abby Maria is a good one, and then we get into my my newer season queens that I have to bring up every single podcast, which are Lauren and Janet. Lauren O'Connell.
Yeah, but
and then
if we want to go pre-20, maybe we go to the Amazon and we get Heidi.
Finally, he said her real name.
Yeah.
That's Will's all time, Mike. That is, you know how Dalton has Sally, Long Sock Sally? Like that's Will with Heidi. It's just ridiculous. It's just unbelievable.
I would say Will or Heidi and Kenny are pretty interchangeable when it comes to like one-time old school players that I'm always fighting for.
All right, so we've got a few. I think we are wanting to maybe focus on, you know, it sucks that we talked about some 5th placers that we have, that we're talking about 2 runner-ups that we're now sort of like disregarding in lieu of 5th placers, it seems. But like again, that place is so fewer and far between compared to the runners-up that I feel like.
And we still have Chrissy and Mike coming up, like
exactly, and Aubrey.
And Aubrey, and I'm looking at Aubrey, and I'm almost thinking like we might be doing back-to-back 5th placers here, because I do feel like this 5th place one, we just named about 10 people.
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of good answers there. Whereas when you look at the runners up, I do feel like we're probably going to be in agreement on some of these based on what we said. So if we're penciling, I'm almost willing to pencil in back-to-back 5th placers here with Coach and Aubrey.
Okay, yeah, I'm willing to do it. We could always go back on our word if there are more runners up we want to squeeze in here, but I feel like that makes a lot of sense because again, that 5th place slot, there's a lot of big personalities that end up going out in 5th here.
Yeah, it's a really good spot. I mean, this is the spot where this is T-Bird as well, right?
T-Bird, I was going to think about throwing her out too.
Yeah, so there's a lot here. So I think what we should do
is talk about both of these spots at once if we think we're going to.
Yeah, I think this makes sense, right? Like if we're all kind of loosely agreeing that we're using the 5th place for both the Coach and Aubrey slots, then it makes sense and make 2 choices together.
Maybe
which makes things both a lot easier and a lot harder now.
Because Aubrey's 3rd finish is technically 16th place. We're not going to use a 16th placer for her here. Redmond brings up Trish. That's another good name from Cagayan for sure.
See, that's the thing where it's again like much like the Brian Corden reference almost. Like if this was like a second chances thing and there wasn't a lot of competition in that area, that would make sense. But I think just given, I mean, you have Abby who's already returned, and then you have talk about like Shane and Heidi and T-Bird who were all in the market to return, but just never did.
Yeah. Do you think, and Mike, I don't know if you like actually know this or if you're, if you have any like guesses, but is 39 just like outcast at this point because of all the negativity that went around it? Because I feel like that's like the people who are solid on that season are so solid with Janet and Lauren, Elaine. These are people, Karishma, that you would think people would want to see again. Nora, Dean, even Tommy, who wasn't in consideration really for Winners at War. Any chance we'd ever see a 39er? Is Janet not even worth considering even in this fantasy world?
I mean, listen, I would love for them to be considered because, yeah, for what it's worth, I do think that Island of the Idols, with some obvious exceptions, like is a very strong cast. You talk about maybe the reverse Caramone and that pre-merge is awesome.
Yeah.
Really, really incredible stuff going on before it all goes to shit. So like, I would hope that's not the case. Maybe enough time gets away and it's like, okay, maybe we'll bring this back into consideration. I don't think so. I think it goes the route of like what Big Brother 15 is to Big Brother, where it's like you have Alyssa, Slater, Riley pop up on something like The Amazing Race, but they're not really talking about that season again on the show proper. I just think it drew way too much controversy. It put Survivor back in the headlines for a very, very bad reason. And so I think on the whole, they're largely going to disregard it.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that.
And it doesn't help that it's just so far away from the next returning season, and excluding Winners at War, it's just been so long, and that's why like 41 didn't even get anybody in, and there's not like the negative controversy around 41 aside from the hourglass, I guess. But like it's like it happens because it's just so far away.
Yeah. A couple other fifth place finishers here. Stephen Brochart brings up PG. Survivor Archivist brings up Eric Reichenbach. I got
Eric. Yeah, Eric. I think that I love Eric, and he's also someone who has been going through a lot since he last played, getting married, having a child. And I loved listening to him with Brandon. I kind of feel like Karamo and Eric was obviously very different from the first time out. He makes it the same place, but it almost makes me feel like I kind of am fine with seeing Eric. Like I was really intrigued to see him come back for fans versus favorites, especially with the fan turned favorite angle of it all. But it was just such a quiet, downplayed game that culminates in like this really odd medevac at the beginning of the finale that, yes, it leaves things on an odd note, but it doesn't exactly have me personally feeling like, oh my God, he got so screwed. I need to see him back again.
I just wish, I had him on the podcast to talk about Parvati, I believe, before 40. And the one thing he did get screwed on is I wish they would have just given us information at that finale about what happened to him and if he was okay, because they just totally at that reunion were like, hey, we're not going to look at the elephant in the room. That's the fact that Brandon's not here because he went crazy. Don't tell him I said that. I don't want him to find me, but it's just
I think he's pursuing other, other people that are purveying him more so than the words being said on this podcast.
That's true. So yeah, I feel like Eric is a good one. I mean, Eric was my favorite back during 16, and I was excited to watch him again on Karamoan, but it's a bummer how he went out there. We don't have a conclusion to him, but I don't feel like it's at the same level as James or something like that.
Yeah,
so
I think we save Eric for fans versus favorites 3.
There you go.
You can only play in fans versus favorites seasons.
I think that's it. Yeah, that's Survivor 56.
All right, so I guess let's get back to the matter of the hand of these fifth placers so we can knock 2 of them out. So again, it seems like some names that were being thrown out here were Heidi, were Shane, T-Bird, PG, Abby Maria, if we want to throw in a Lauren O'Connell or a Janet as well. Are there like any and Kenny as well? So it's literally several names that we have to get him down to 2.
I think what we should do here is Mike and I should pick, and Will should have no say, so that we don't end up with Heidi, because I can't stand.
We can top Heidi out again. A personal honorable mention that I just wanted to get in here.
And
honestly, if Heidi's like, seriously, watch Amazon again. Like, she is way more strategic than, for being the 6th iteration of the show, she's showing strategic prowess far more than like most players who are playing the next 4 or 5 seasons. So
there's a reason why she ends up getting the boot over Jenna at Final 5. They were more threatened by her.
Exactly.
Yeah. I will throw Lauren too, because that's like the same boat as well with Heidi, so that's fine. So I feel like Kenny, Janet, PG, T-Bird, Abby Maria. Did I miss one?
Shane.
I mean, I don't want to overload on men here, because then we're not going to have any left for Rob C. And potentially one other person that I think is probably one of the most egregious misses of the old school.
I know who you're talking about.
But I do feel like Kenny and Shane are probably the 2 best here, but maybe we pick one of them and then we pick one of the women here.
I think we got to pick one. I think I'm Team Kenny. I think Bloom is Team Shane, and Phil, it comes down to you as the tiebreaker here. This is honestly probably one of the hardest ones for me, because I do love both of these people.
Yeah, you're like the Bachelor right now, Phil. There's only one rose to give to these 2 men standing in front of you.
And I'm going to tell you right now, it's 2 very good looking men. This is a tough choice.
You are talking about Kenny and Shane, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Don't worry, everybody. I'm not harming Will and Mike here, but I think I'll go with the totally fantasy world of this, and I'll go with Shane. Because I do feel like, as much as I love Kenny, and if I was picking between Kenny and pretty much anybody else, I'd probably go Kenny. But Kenny and Shane, let's go with Shane, because people thought after his Panama run that he would come back. And what's really crazy to me is when you think about Panama, Terry and Shane are the ones from that final 5 who have come back with the least impact. And you would almost think that they would have been, Serene was obviously going to be a star, but the fact that Danielle and Aris have both gotten more Survivor time than Terry or Shane is kind of crazy when you rewatch Panama. So I'll go with Shane for this spot.
And I think, when it comes to proximity, we don't have Serene, but we can reuse the graphic of, a contestant from Survivor Exile Island has arrived on the season. Exactly.
Which is what's important. We don't want the intern to overdo it here. And then who do you guys want for the 5th place woman? I'd probably say I'd like T-Bird the most out of the ones that you've all said.
Yeah, so it's basically T-Bird, PG, Abby, or Janet. What do you think, Will?
I'm between Abby and T-Bird.
Those are probably the 2 I'm between as well.
Yeah.
PG, I absolutely loved her on China, and not to say we got a fair shake out of her from Cambodia. She gets kind of screwed in the midst of everything that happens with that tribe split. And Janet, again, got absolutely hosed in Survivor Island of the Idols. If that coin flips a different direction, she wins the game. But again, it's tough comparing to Abby Maria, who, much like Shane, is just this massive presence who does come back for a second time and continues to be a massive presence, or T-Bird, who, much like we talked about with Shane, massive sense of positivity. If you did a fan favorite award for Survivor Africa, it's probably her or Ethan that ends up winning it. And then to have her, do so much for the community, as we talked about with Shawn, and not get a chance to come back is fairly criminal.
Yeah, I think our cast is leaning very, very old school. We have Jerry, Shawn, Colleen, Shane. And so maybe I would lean towards Abby Maria here just to kind of even out the eras. Something I think the 50 cast did a really poor job of, that if we're going to take this responsibility on ourselves in our dream world, then we should spread out the eras a little bit more evenly. So I would lean going to season 25 over season 3.
Mike, where would you go on that? I think I'd go T-Bird, so I'm going to let you.
Oh, okay. Now I get to be the decider.
I think Abby Maria can get a little exhausting. So I don't need a lot of episodes of Abby Maria. She'd be somebody I'd root to get 5 or 6 in and then get voted out.
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, now are we starting to look at cast chemistry as well? Are we going to be like, who's going to be fun to? Because Abby and Malcolm have already interacted with each other in the past. Oh man, this is really, really tough because I don't want to deprive T-Bird of another chance, nor do I want to necessarily be like, oh my God, we can't see Abby Maria again. Right now, and this could change. Yeah, I'll put Abby in right now. That's because I do agree with Will that I think let's try to compensate for that sequence from 18 to 32 that has not been mentioned whatsoever in the course of the Survivor 50 cast. And so it might be weird throwing in 2 people from Philippines, but Philippines is an awesome cast. And I might go back on my word by the end of this and be like, can we do T-Bird instead?
I totally get where you're coming from.
There's also 3 David vs. Goliath players in season 50. So it's like, it's not totally out there.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I mean, you could load this up with China. So, I mean, now we're into all one-time players. So I think this will be a little bit easier and a little bit quicker because we have 2 second places, a third, a fourth, and a 7th that we are working with. So first up is Chrissy with a 2nd place finish. Now there was already a name that was mentioned, and that's who I have written down, which was Amanda. I think Mike, did Will bring up Amanda? One of you brought up Amanda earlier.
I think that was Mike who brought up Amanda, but I have Amanda. I mean, for the Mike White spot anyway. So might as well toss her in. But also, if we're going proximity, just the runner up the season after.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We have 2 second placers, so maybe we should talk about these in sequence as well because we'll get Chrissy and Mike here. So I think we're all in unanimity that Amanda should be locked in. The question is, who is that other 2nd place finisher? I think Dom is probably the leader in the clubhouse, but just to throw out some other names, Courtney Yates, technically a 2nd place finisher as well. I know a lot of people want to see her back. we could pull the trigger on a Russell Hantz if we wanted to, who is also a very notable second place finisher.
Yeah, I mean, Courtney and Russell are both names that have come to mind. Now, I'm in current Russell exhaustion because I just rewatched Samoa and Heroes versus Villains back to back. So I'm currently in that mode that I think a lot of America was, where it was like, wow, that was exciting, but also, okay, I'm ready for some fresh faces. Can't wait to see the season 21 cast. I'm sure it's going to be great. That's the mode I'm in. And yes, I'm 5 episodes into Nicaragua and it's still that bad. But I feel like, so because of that, Dom is the one that calls out to me. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like when Dom played with Wendell, that was probably one of the most entertaining duos, especially in a season that was not good, right? Like Ghost Island is pretty universally not loved. The fact of how entertaining Dom and Wendell were, though, and how Dom carries that season, and then how you have the tie and all of that go down, it feels like Dom would have been a lock to be on 40 if it wasn't all winners.
Mm-hmm.
He would have been a lock to be on 42 if they had done a returning player season shortly after, like they usually do. He would have been a lock to be on anything. And then all of a sudden 50 comes and it's, oh, we kind of forgot about Dom. No way they should have forgotten about Dom. I think Dom is just, I think that's an egregious miss, especially with how many people from the 30s they picked with Chrissy, Angelina, Mike, Christian, and Devins. I can't argue with Mike, Christian, or Devins at all. Like, I get that. But Dom, to me, would get the nod over all 3 of them. If I was casting, it was solely in my hands, I would have put Dom over all of them. And I like all of them.
Well, I think especially when we talk about a story perspective, I know that Kellen says it every time she comes onto these Survivor 50 podcasts, is like, this guy came the closest to winning out of anybody in Survivor history. He tied the jury vote. If one person votes a different way, he is a champion. And so I think that is massively unexplored potential for redemption, for, can I get the monkey off my back and actually get the W? Or, can I find another person to partner up with? How do I play without a Wendell type? Can I still make it happen? So he makes a lot of sense to me for the runner-up over Courtney, who I do think was done dirty in Heroes versus Villains with how small of an edit that she got. But I also feel like, as much as I adore her to death, the arc we got from her in Survivor China, it was great to see her back for a second season. Even if we just got that, it would have been enough, considering that, as she mentioned, she was served up the server that she was to be like the first boot of that season. And for her to make it all the way to the end and win an immunity, did you win an immunity, John Robert? I thought was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Courtney is probably my all-time favorite in terms of confessionals and stuff. Like, if you were to ask who's my favorite female player, I think it's Courtney, and it's not even close. Because I love everything she does. And even in Heroes Villains, she doesn't talk much, but they cut to her for every reaction shot. She is the reaction shot queen on that season. And I love her. So I would watch her play again too. I also feel like on Heroes versus Villains, her and Sandra might have been supposed to be in there to also be the people who go out so that the favorites could stay around a little bit longer. And then her and Sandra just weasel the way in because they're both really likable. And I mean, she's 1 vote away potentially from being the winner of that season. If she makes the merge, she could easily win that season. Nobody's voting her out. So yeah, I mean, I love her, but I feel like it should be Dom and Amanda. I feel like the clamoring for Amanda that I saw when people found out that her name could be in the mix was insane. People just like lost their minds over it. And you forget how popular some of these older players are when you get so caught up in, who's the new hot thing on social media or whatever. And then all of a sudden a name comes up and it gets dangled in front of us and you really see how ravenous the fan base can be for certain people. I mean, Amanda Kimmel, I'd never seen reactions like that. And then she posted that picture with her dogs and everybody like absolutely exploded. So yeah, Amanda would have been great. So I think Amanda and Dom would be my 2 second placers.
That feels like an easy one, despite all the other names. We're also, if we do want Russell in, there is a place still remaining for Russell.
Yeah,
if
there
we
is.
Want to have that discussion. So,
which is 3rd for everybody keeping track at home. So that would be the next one. That's the Angelina spot. Now, I'm looking through this, Mike, as we had said, we're trying to keep it even with men and women. So right now we have 4 women. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 men. So if we were to do a man here for this 3rd place finish, then we'd be looking to do women for the 7th.
Wait, are you jumping over Christian, though? You're jumping over the Christian spot.
Well, I was going to do Angelina's first.
Okay.
So second, 3rd, 7th, 4th to go chronologically through it. So yeah, that's the tough thing is like, do we use Rob here and fill out our 6 men? Or do we go for somebody different like a Kathy or like another third place finisher?
Or a Cass.
Or a
Or
Russell.
Cass, or a Russell.
I would go Rob over Russell. Okay.
I would agree. Much like Redemption Island, Rob over Russell.
There you go. Yeah.
Exactly.
For me, it would be between those two, though. Just for who has done so much like for the show, and talk about like Mount Rushmore level people. Maybe they're not necessarily on it, but like I think it has to be one of them. I would go Rob Sesternino, as I said, with my very first pick, because we did bring him up and did not have him on the cast. Just feels wrong.
Yeah, listen, again, I'm a homer for this, but like to see the outcry over Rob not being included in the Survivor 50 cast was very understandable, considering that if we are acknowledging people like Shawn, for instance, who have contributed so much to the community and changed the course of Survivor from outside the game, I do think that, listen, podcasts certainly existed in 2010 when RHAP first came out, but like he has changed the game when it comes to the way people consume the show. There are plenty of players that I talk to before they start the game where they say that like part of their preparation is listening to RHAP and hearing sage wisdom from former players as to how to approach certain things that they can incorporate into their own game. That wasn't necessarily something like we had sort of like the Castaway Strike Back blogs that happened over the course of like Survivor Vanuatu and Palau or something. But otherwise, there were really a lot of avenues for players to come on and talk about the current season and, advise contestants as to what to do. And I think Rob is a game changer in those many ways. I adore Kathy to death, but like, it's just really tough for me, again, given a lot of the, the hoopla that came out when the 50 cast was released, to pass up the opportunity to put Rob in here.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. And I originally had Kathy and Rob, so I didn't put Jerry. So like I'm gonna read off mine at the end because I feel like this what we're getting here isn't really far off from what I had originally put. But Kathy was somebody where the 3rd and 8th just fit, so that's why I went with that. But Rob was always somebody who was on my list. It was kind of like Rob, Dom, Malcolm, Shawn Recctor were non-negotiable for me. It was just a matter of where are we putting them. And right now, all of them are on if we put Rob on here.
Yeah. So again, we'll pencil them in. We can look at, especially since we now have to put 2 women in these spots to see, what we might have to shift around. But it makes sense to me.
Yeah. So I don't. So we're gonna go into Christians now because it's 7th place from season 37, and then Devon's was 38. So again, this is where I had Lauren Rimmer. So if we're looking for women's 7th place finishers, that's why I ultimately ended up going with Lauren here instead of one of those other 7th place men that we were talking about earlier, because I was looking for the women and I felt like Lauren is one of the more popular people from Heroes versus Healers versus Hustlers. And it offsets the fact that we lose Chrissy. We then also get somebody from 35, which I actually do think, again, a pretty good cast, just not the most popular of seasons.
Yeah, but if you're going proximity, you're 2 seasons away from Dave vs. Goliath. You could be 1 season away if you wanted to be.
Will getting his girl in here.
Kellen, bring Kellen back. Another honorable mention who I always shoe into these casts, and understandably, I can understand if you don't agree, but wanted to toss her name into the mix.
Now, could I throw something out here?
Sure.
Because we know this has to be a woman. Dare I go back to the conversation we had 2 people ago, put Abby in this spot, 7th place finisher in Cambodia, and put T-Bird in for the 5th place spot?
So this is how Mike gets what he wants across the board. Mike tricks us.
Exactly. You didn't know it until, so I would propose that as well. I mean, again, for 7th placers, if we feel like there is anybody like a Lauren, like a Kellen that we would want to see over Abby and T-Bird together, I am more than happy to, acquiesce. Michaela as well is a 7th place finisher technically in Game Changers, but I figured I would throw that out there,
And then we put Kellen in the Stephanie LaGrossa spot from way earlier.
We get rid of James, and then we can put in a different 4th place man. We're just gonna have a totally confusing thing. I'd rather go T-Bird Abby then Lauren Abby.
Makes
That's
sense.
my opinion.
Yeah.
But also I'm lower on Abby than I think most, because I think Abby is phenomenal TV. But I also think that Abby is one of those characters, again, where I say, give me a couple episodes of Abby, that's perfect. Too deep of a run from Abby, and I start to be like, okay, it's the same thing. I've seen it. But so
Yeah,
that
and I think that there might be some like outcry of like, okay, well, what's going on with these 30s seasons? But the fact of the matter is, a lot of these 30s people were cast on 50 proper. You know, like that's
Yeah.
where Chrissy, Mike, Angelina, Christian, Rick are coming back that a lot of people have been eagerly awaiting for. So they're not in this cast. So this is our opportunity to be like, all right, are there other people from the 30s? We put Dom in there, which I do think in that period is probably like the one that we felt kind of got left off the table. You know, I mean, listen, we'll get into our fourth place, or maybe there's another one that I could throw out there. But
maybe.
I personally think like putting T-Bird and Abby in there makes sense to me over a Lauren Abby.
And Abby is technically the 30. She played in season 31.
That's true,
And then we
that's
also
true.
have Malcolm, who played in season 34. So, like, even if their original season wasn't in the 30s, we do have still representation across all the eras.
I want to throw out one more name, though, as a seventh placer if you're looking for 30s. And again, maybe from a season that they're not going to consider. But what about Elaine?
Elaine is another name that I definitely had up there as well. I think it's also like I'm kind of looking at this cast and it's like looking pretty legendary that like I love Elaine so much. She is such a hoot. She is one of the funniest Survivor contestants I can remember in recent memory. I don't know how she would fit in sort of like even like the one-timers like a Shane, like possibly a T-Bird, like a Shawn, like have that legacy to them that makes it feel weighty to have them included on season 50. I don't know. I would love to see it. I don't know where she would fit from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. It like an entertaining player for sure, but not so much like iconic. Like if you look at the names we have, she would kind of stand out in that way.
I also would argue that like her and Lauren are probably competing for the same spot archetype wise as well.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely.
100%. All right, so we're thinking T-Bird goes for Aubrey, Abby Maria goes here, and then we just close it out with a fourth place woman. And no, we totally were going to do all 20 of these, all 24 of these.
Yeah, of course.
30 minutes, Mike. We totally were going to be able to do that. Anyway, so this is where I had Malcolm. So I don't actually have any other fourth place people even on my radar right now because all the other fourth place spots, which was just the one with Serene, I had put Davey in for her sixth place spot. So in terms of fourth placers, I'm not committed to anybody because this is where I had fit Malcolm in. So I'm open to anything here.
I think there's two people from the Australian Outback that you can look at for this spot.
Which would be, so this could be where we shift Jerry.
Well, it could be where we should. I was thinking Elizabeth Filarski. Wasn't she in the mix for this cast? Like actually playing 50?
We don't know.
From what I have heard, like that the call might have been coming from inside the house. If it's like, let's get.
Oh, interesting.
I think she claimed on social media, right, that like she was never actually in consideration.
I hadn't heard this.
I'm not entirely sure, but so maybe that will come out in some way, shape, or form. So a couple of fourth place women that we can talk about, ones that have been circulated for a while. We can talk about another woman who only played once but has been mentioned many times, and in fact was out there as an alternate for Heroes versus Villains in Natalie Bolton. We can talk about Sydney from Co Wrong.
Yeah, and yep.
We can talk about Kelly Wentworth.
Kelly Wentworth, I feel like could be a good one for this spot because of what we were talking about with like the lack of newer seasons. Kelly plays from 29 to 38, so she kind of scratches that itch in a way that some of these others don't. I mean, Jerry, Shawn, Colleen, Shane, T-Bird now, Rob Cesternino. I mean, you're talking 6 of these people haven't played after season 12. Or I guess Jerry plays in 20, but still, I still consider Jerry to be old school because even watching her back in Heroes versus Villains, she plays such an Australia game still, but somehow would have won that season. Tina Wesson, Survivor Archive.
That's when I said 2 Australian Outback women. I was thinking, Elizabeth and Tina.
That's a good one too.
That would break our kind of no winner rule, but who says there are any rules?
And she didn't play on 40, so that's fair. Taj is another name that has come up here from Token Cheans, which I think is a very fair one. Yeah, I mean, personally, Mike, when you brought him up, Wentworth was the one who jumped out to me, but I think that there's plenty of there's so many good options here that I'm willing to kind of talk this way. It's a good ending point to hit this fourth place.
There's just a very despite the fact that we are restricted to one gender, like it's a very fruitful garden here.
Yeah,
because you have again the range of like Natalie and Sydney and Taj who have only come back, who have only played once and have been, talked about amongst the community to come back, to Kelly Wentworth, who would be back for her fourth time, but like has not played for a while. I think a lot of people absolutely fell in love with her this second time out, that like it still feels like there's a little bit of fruit on that vine. We could go in a lot of different directions here.
Will, where do you lean when we talk about
I'm more
this?
looking at the 11 players that we have, and I've said it already. We are shifting very old school. So I am kind of thinking Kelly Wentworth is a great person to put in, just to have someone who's a little bit more recent. Just because we do have, we have season 1, season 2, season 4, we have season 3 now with T-Bird. So like to get someone who has played across 3 seasons in the late 20s and 30s makes sense to me.
It's so funny to me because I'm going through this now and going season by season as quick as I can on the Wikipedia. And I know people always talk about, early boots skew women, and are there more men or women winners? You always talk about that. Fourth place might be the most evenly dispersed placement of men and women ever. I feel like every other season it's a man, woman, man, woman, man, woman. And there are a lot of really good players. It's funny how when the Fallen Angel kind of went to this spot, there's a lot of players who are really interesting here. There's also some where you go, wow, I forgot about that person, like Christina Cha. I just went through One World and I was like, what? But then you had Azie before that. David Wright was a name that obviously we're not going to discuss because we're only talking women here. But yeah, there's a lot of good names for this fourth place spot, going pretty far back. I mean, you just keep going.
Yeah, it's really tough picking. So it sounds like Wentworth is what we're saying. I would probably put in a vote for Natalie Bolton, just because for me, the appeal of like, we have not seen her back. She's the only Black Widow Brigade member to not return multiple times. Like, let's see this undiscovered.
What about Alexis?
Exactly. Yeah, no one ever remembers Alexis, the Pete Best of the Black Widow Brigade. But at the same time, maybe it is like I talked about with Courtney, like one of these like very fun one and done characters. Her edit is so freaking weird, where she is invisible for half the season and has this absolutely aggro episode where she wants to floss with Jason's jugular and then has one of the most WTF Final Tribal Council questions ever. But I do feel like if you're talking about 50, I don't know, it feels like Wentworth would be more of a representative of that. Plus we have Amanda representing the Black Widow Brigade, sort of like Serene, kind of locking it down for them on 50 proper. So
we also have James in this season, just that would be a third Micronesia player.
Well, and the other thing is too, we have a lot of one-time players in here already too, with Shawn Recctor, with Colleen, with Shane, with T-Bird. So I feel like and then Dom obviously. So we'd actually have 5 of the 7. I feel like we've kind of covered that. And I think some of the appeal of Natalie Bolton is that she's only played once, and that's why people get so excited about the idea of this. But if we're already kind of scratching a lot of itches of people, if I'm looking at what's going to make the best version of the Survivor 50 cast, Kelly Wentworth is guaranteed good TV. Natalie Bolton isn't necessarily that, because like you said, Mike, she's really not on that season until she is. And then when she is, she's great. But there is an alternate universe where Natalie Bolton doesn't get Eric to give up the necklace, and Natalie Bolton's getting the Purple Kelly edit before Purple Kelly gets it.
Yeah, I mean, she basically went half purple. She's like a nice lavender, I would say, of like just a little bit more color added in there. So yeah, I'm good putting Wentworth in our last spot here.
So that would give us Jenna's replaced with Jerry, Colby's replaced with Shawn Recctor, Stephanie is replaced with James, which makes me so happy. Serene is replaced with Colleen, Azie with Malcolm, Coach with Shane, Aubrey with T-Bird, Chrissy with Amanda, Angelina with Rob C, Mike with Dom, Christian with Abby Maria, and Devins with Wentworth.
Yeah,
I'm not
hell of a cast.
And that's proximity with Devins and Wentworth that I didn't even realize. They're on the same season.
Exactly. She had a hand in voting him out the first time.
And he had a hand in voting her out.
Exactly. I kind of love this. Like, yes, is it us kind of predictably slotting in some names that have been talked about many times in terms of these snubs? Absolutely. And of course, there were many, many people that we couldn't squeeze in there. I'm sure there'll be plenty of comments fired up, if not in this moment, about like, where is blank? But this
Where's
feels like
Heidi?
exactly. This feels like a really good roundup of a lot of people that got left off of 50 for one reason or another, really spanning from, four-time players in the forms of Amanda and Wentworth to those who were such big stars in their heyday and we have been waiting to come back, probably most prominently represented in Colleen Haskell.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, oh no, Willed with the sneeze that came out of nowhere. He looked like it was gonna be nothing. I mean, obviously they're not gonna be able to pull a Colleen. That's not gonna happen, right? So but when you look at this cast, it just leaves you scratching your head sometimes. I'm not saying they did bad with all the old school.
No, we're not ever gonna say they did a bad job.
But I just feel like there's some just egregious misses. I've said that word so many times now this podcast, but there are some that are just, what are we doing?
See, but for me, Phil, it hasn't been about the misses. It's about it's not the people that they didn't cast. It's more so, I hate to say it, it's about the people that we did cast. A lot of head scratchers that did end up making the cast. Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with the 12-12 split of old school versus new era. But still, I think we've shown, and we left a lot of our favorites off. Again, Kellen, Heidi, Kenny aren't on this list, shockingly. But you look at this group we put together in less than an hour and a half, and it's leagues ahead of what we got, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. And we're gonna have to come back for part 2, which will be us recasting the 12 new era people. Mike, we got to figure out when that's going to be. I'm assuming probably second week of July, right? 4th of July week's got to be chaos for everybody now.
Who knows at this point? We could create our own fireworks. I will say considerably easier job for many reasons. Not only because, if we talk about like potential, unlike some of these other players, we don't necessarily have the well, they haven't played in 15 years. I wonder what they'd be like. For some of these people, it would be what, like 3-4 years at the most. We only have 8 seasons to choose between, only a certain range of outcomes. We have to pick 2 other new era winners to put in there. And of course, there is the question about what to do with our 249 people. We have an idea in mind that we are going to throw in there. But I'm excited to get into this. I would imagine it will not be nearly as long of a process and nearly of a discussion-filled process as this was, but it times out perfectly that we were able to talk through the unenviable job of putting another cast of 12 old school Survivor players together. But I think we rose to the occasion.
It never gets old. I will say recasting with old schoolers never gets old. I could talk about that stuff till I'm blue in the face. So I love it.
It's always a good time. I think here's a pitch for what we do with the pre-mergers for 49, or for 49, we do 2 Jelinskis. Just
one is Dave and one is Jelinski.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I like that. One has like a shaved head. The other looks like Jelinski. I like where we're going here. Look, I'm excited. I'm excited to dive into part 2. Part 1 was a lot of fun. Let us know where you think we missed. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we have so much going on. But before we get into us, Mike, what are you doing? What are you doing that you want everybody to know about right now?
What are you doing? It's a great question. I say that in the mirror every morning as I dive into talking about Survivor once more. So the big thing that I'm doing right now on a weekly basis is that I put out a survey a while ago at this point, before the Survivor 50 cast was actually released, of 100 moments that we picked from the first 48 seasons. And then you all voted to see what the greatest moments in Survivor history were. We have officially gone down to the top 5, baby. But last night on our HAP, I was joined by Owen, Jake, and Mo to break down moments 10 through 6. I reveal what one of them is, but you won't want to miss the rest of them. I mean, we're really getting down to much like with this casting process, the nitty gritty, the best of the best, or it really is ticky tack as to it's not a matter of if it'll show up on this list, it's when. And it's been a lot of fun continuing to go down memory lane with Survivor. So check that out. I have stepped in for one of our cast members, Rob Cesarino, while he's away playing Traders, doing post-season interviews with the cast of Survivor 48. Talk with Shaheen last week. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern will be my interview with Eva. Talk about another second place finisher that, we might be talking about in a couple of weeks in terms of slotting somebody in. That was a really interesting interview. Really recommend everyone check that out. And then the other big thing is that tomorrow, somehow, Squid Game has snuck up upon us in the midst of everything that's been going on. The third and final season is coming back. I'll be joined by Chappelle doing daily recaps, so 1 episode per day of the last season over on We Know Scripted TV and Nothing But Netflix. Otherwise, you can follow everything I'm doing at a Mike Bloom type. Big Brother's around the corner as well, so there's going to be plenty of reality stuff. Oh, I do the Reality Flash as well, which is like a big breaking news podcast for RHAP. They announced the cast of Perfect Match on Netflix, and I'll be doing a quick reality flash about that sometime soon as well. So it's like a river, you know, it's always moving, and I can never do the same podcast twice.
I like, though, that you're not busy. That's the good thing.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
The off season, Survivor's not
This is me being sedentary right now. Just wait until, you know, the fall when we have Amazing Race and Survivor on at the same time, and Big Brother finishing up.
Yeah, I think I messaged you at one point this year when the Traitors and Survivor, and I told you I'm rewatching AU, and then AU was on. And
oh, yeah, and AU versus the World is going to be coming back soon, too.
I want to watch that, too. I'm going to actually watch AU versus the World. I don't know if I'll be podcasting with Bill, but I want to check that one out.
McKenna and we did a podcast with Miles Qua, the winner of Brains vs. Brawn 2. We did a podcast with him breaking down the cast of AU versus the World, and he gives a lot of good insights into the Australian people, which was nice. I'm almost done. I'm halfway through Heroes versus Villains, and then all I have left is Titans versus Rebels. So, Mike, I locked myself in this room, and I've just been doing it for our patrons. It's great.
Listen, could it be a lot worse spending your time watching, some would argue, some of like the best back-to-back seasons in Survivor history, let alone Australian Survivor history?
Oh, yeah. Heroes versus Villains, amazing. Now, Blood versus Water, you know, I've
always,
now
always
undergone
dark
torture.
is just before the dawn. Yeah,
it's crazy. I could survive anything at this point. So, but we're doing for Survivor 50 coverage every day. Pretty much, we're putting out either a defining episode for one of the players, or we're doing everything you need to know about. Will's first everything you need to know about in the series is coming out on Monday. We're going to be talking about Genevieve. We already recorded it. These are all pre-recorded, so it's different than our live stuff. So I know some people are like, what is going on? We drop them on everything you need to know about. It's normally Mondays and Thursdays. This week it was Monday and Wednesday because obviously we're doing this podcast today. Yesterday's was about Rick Devens. And so Blake and I talk about Rick Devens and everything you need to know about him, which he's a challenge beast. It's crazy to think that he won 4 immunities.
4 immunity challenges. Yeah.
Crazy. So we're doing that. We're also doing defining episodes. So we've been kind of going back and forth with the older players and then the newer players. And we talked about Colby's defining episode, Jenna's defining episode. We're going to have Stephanie LaGrossa's coming out tomorrow. So that'll be dropping at 1 o'clock. And then next Tuesday, I'm going to be live with Survivor Analytics. I don't know if any of you follow Survivor Analytics over on TikTok or anything, but I'm going to be live with Survivor Analytics. And we're going to be doing a player ranking for Survivor 50. And I think we're going to do it based on threat level. So I think we're like, you know, who can actually win this thing? So
I got analytics go into threat level, I wonder.
I don't know. Survivor Analytics, though. So we're going to be doing that. That'll be next Tuesday on July 1st. So we got plenty that is going on. We're putting out 2 of these defining episodes every week. We're putting out 2 of these everything you know about every week. And then we got to do part 2 of this, which I'm assuming is going to be second week of July. Like I said, we'll figure it out.
I'll be around. You can find me anytime and we can.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you're busy at all. So
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Mike will find his 20 minutes that he can somehow turn into an hour and a half. I don't know how he does it. The man's a wizard, but we're also doing patreon.com/the specialist. We're talking heroes versus villains right now for Every Season Matters. So our top tier patrons are listening to us gush over that season of Survivor. We do a rock draw. We do casting perspective. We're doing some movie stuff. John and I are talking blockbusters right now for July 4th, Tuesday. We're talking Independence Day. So that'll be fun. Otherwise, and I'm doing Australian Survivor heroes versus villains every Friday. See, it's nonstop too. It's fun. Mike, thank you so much for joining. Love having you on as always.
Thank you for having me on again. You know, the last time we talked Survivor 50, we'll keep on talking Survivor 50 until Survivor 50 comes. But I relish in the opportunity I get to hop on with the two of you guys, especially getting to serve as like the 3-headed Jesse Tannenbaum this time around to cast this season, which I thought was a really, really fun exercise personally.
Season 55.
We're not done yet. We still got halfway there. So.
All right. Thank you all so much for listening. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.